and welcome to the game review here on the Silverbird Selection. Today I'm looking at a game that was originally released by Firebird Software in 1985 in their horrible white and red packaging with a big screenshot on the front, but it was then re-released in 1986 in the Silver Range packaging, and it's called Cylu. Now this is a fairly uncommon game to find in this packaging. The earlier packaging is really easy to find, but this one's not so easy to find. I wouldn't say it's rare, but it's fairly uncommon. My copy cost me £1, probably as part of a bundle years ago, don't remember when I picked it up. So let's take a look at Cylu and see how it goes. So here's the cover, and I think it's a pretty nice one actually. Obviously got the usual Silver Range branding, but the logo is quite nice, sort of metallic shiny logo, and a nice metallic shiny robot on the front there reaching out of the cover towards you, enshrouded with lightning. And that logo's on the spine, of course. The picture wraps around with a bit more lighting on the back there. A couple of screenshots which are pretty murky looking, and the info about the game says crack the logic of the super maze and pass the ultimate test, whatever that means. Moving inside the packaging, we can see a very short list of other exciting games in the 199 Silver Range at this point in time, just proving that it is one of the earliest Silver Range releases. And then inside we've got the in-crowd Silver Club thing on the right hand side and the instructions on the left. Cylu, copyright G Foley, that's Jeff Foley, as we'll see when the game loads. Gives you an overview of the game. Your quest, Cylu, begins in a small crowded chamber deep within the heart of a large maze. There are 24 objects which must be collected and returned to the starting point and deposited in the master computer. There's also some force fields that will bar your way, and teleport terminals, stuff like that basically. Then you've got some loading instructions and the gameplay instructions. It says full instructions are provided in the program itself with some useful hints, and it's got all the keyboard controls there. So you've got rotation, moving forward, picking up, dropping, examining and using objects, pause and restart, all that kind of stuff. And at the bottom there it says Cylu may carry up to 5 objects at any time in the cargo bays. Only one bay may be accessed at any time. Try to finish the quest with as low an efficiency rating as possible. That's a strange thing. You'd have thought high efficiency would be good rather than low. Anyway, there we go. That's the instructions. Let's see what the game's like when it loads. Quick look at the loading screen then. As you can see, it says Cylu at the top, Firebird Software at the bottom, and Jeff Foley's name's in the middle there, just confirming that his name is Jeff. And otherwise you can see sort of a landscape of some kind of maze. Actually, now I've looked at it a bit more closely, it's actually like circuit boards with resistors and capacitors and integrated circuits and things on it, so that's quite clever, but it does have a very ported over from the Spectrum kind of look to it. All in all though, not a bad loading screen. This is the title screen of the game then. As you can see, very text based, there's no graphics on it. It's got the Cylu name scrolling across the top in rainbow colours, and underneath that it says by Jeff Foley, published by Firebird, copyright 1985. There's also a number of numeric options at the top there that you can choose from to see lots of information about how to play the game and what you have to do. As the inlay said, the instructions are really in the game rather than in the inlay. So let's start. You can see the controls are on the screen there. Don't need to worry too much about those. I've already memorised roughly what those are. So let's have a look at the story. It says Cylu the Otson, the chosen one of the people, enters the land of evil to participate in the final challenge. The aim is simple, the quest is long. Many say Cylu will not be leaving. That's encouraging. The Otson require a new leader. The test devised for Cylu is presented here, a test of wit, speed, logic and cunning, a test which only the worthy will pass. Yeah, okay. Let's move on to the hints then. So there's a number of hints. It says examine everything, tells you a bit of information about how to use the objects and things like that. Stand next to and facing a force field, press Control to disable force fields. Okay. More hints here. It says collect all objects. Each silicon chip is encoded with a unique code, and when deposited a force field is deactivated. Seems like some repetition of the hints here. Tells you about teleport keys and things like that as well. And then another page of hints. Hints 3 to teleport, stand facing next to a teleport. Map the plane area. You start standing next to the IO unit, and this one's quite important at the bottom here. Fuel is required to keep the life support system fitted internally to Cylu functional. And then there's another page which is the aim of the game. To complete the test, every item must be deposited into the computer's IO unit. the lower the efficiency rating when completed, the better. And it said that in the inlay as well. That seems strange. You'd think a high efficiency rating would be good, not a low one, but hey, what do I know? So let's just go back to the controls. You can see there quickly there's controls for get, drop, use, examine, various other things, including the controls. You can use a joystick to control the character, which it didn't say you could in the instructions in the inlay, but you can do. And there's also at the bottom there the options to save and load a game, which I won't be doing, but that's a pretty good feature for a budget game, I would have thought. So enough talk about what's on the title screen, let's get on and play the game, and you do that by pressing 1. And the first thing I'm going to do is just pause the game, and when you pause it you get the familiar Commodore 64 loading bars around the edge of the screen for some reason. The reason I've paused is just to explain this stuff, because one key factor here is that you've got a limited amount of fuel, and when that runs out you die, so I don't want to waste it talking about the game, so that's why I've paused it basically. The right hand side of the screen there is your inventory, so you've got 5 inventory slots, you can carry 5 items at once. Also on that side you can see the fuel, which is currently at 823, that goes down very quickly as you'll see when I unpause the game. Also shows the number of items you've got, and also your efficiency rating, which starts at 0 and goes up, and as we've already seen, the lower efficiency rating when you complete the game. Not that I'm expecting to do that, the better you do basically, the better score. It's also got Cylu written across the bottom of the screen, which just looks like it's there to fill in space. And then on the left hand side is the actual gameplay area. So it's an isometric style, obviously fashioned after the famous Ultimate Games, Night Law, Alien 8, things like that, but not as good. The Commodore 64 doesn't really do these isometric wireframe style graphics very well. They're a bit blocky. They look a lot better on the Spectrum. I'll give the Spectrum that. I'm not a huge Spectrum fan, but in this case these kind of graphics look a lot better in the high resolution graphics mode on the Spectrum. So anyway, enough talk about that, let's actually get on and play the game. So oddly it's space to pause and control to unpause. Why you need 2 buttons for that I don't know, but there we go. So I've unpaused. So you probably couldn't tell from just looking at it, but the little thing with the bug eyes and the feet, that's me at the bottom of the screen there, just walking backwards and forwards. That's the central computer, as it said in the hints. You start by that. So the idea is to walk along, find items and deposit them in that computer, and there's an item here, so you press F1 to pick that up, you can press F7 to examine it. It's a book. So let's take that, drop that in there, that's F5 to drop it into the computer. Number of items goes up by 1, efficiency ratings gradually going up as well, and on we go to find another item. And the next item I'm going to pick up, well, good luck to you if you can spot it on this screen, but with a bit of trial and error I found that this item here is an item, it's not just a piece of scenery. And if we examine that, it's fuel supply, and I'm going to need that soon because as you can see my fuel's going down rapidly. So with that equipped, by the way, if you top it up too soon you're basically wasting fuel because it only ever goes up to 999. So if you were to use it with 200 fuel units left, then I would be wasting a lot of the fuel. Interesting. Why is it not? Oh, ooh, that was close. Pressing the wrong button. F5 to use it. So as you can see there, it's gone up to 999. It would do that regardless of what level my fuel level was at. So let's pick up this item here, and let's just quickly look at that. It's a silicon chip. I believe they're supposed to be used to disable force fields. So let's go and deposit that. Yeah, force field 20 has been disabled, wherever that is. It's not that one there. So there you go, that's pretty much it. You wander around, find items and take them back to that central computer. As you can see, the screen changes colour each screen you go onto, but it's all one colour. Very difficult to discern items from just the background graphics. And also there's various places where it looks like you can probably walk through a gap, but you can't. It's just the arrangement of the items on the screen makes it difficult to do that. As I said, this kind of game just doesn't work particularly well on the Commodore 64, and this is not a very good example of it anyway. So okay, there's another book by the looks of it, so let's pick that up. Yeah, it's another book. But what I really need now is fuel, because I'm down to 200 fuel units and they're rapidly going down. So to cycle through inventory slots, you press the fire button. There's another silicon chip. Not looking like I'm going to find any fuel anytime soon though, which is bad news because I've nearly run out. And there we go. Fuel's run out and that's game over. My fuel is exhausted, the Otsan are not pleased, you're banished to a far corner of the universe. I barely got time to describe anything about the game there, graphics, sound or gameplay, but I'm not going to play it again because frankly it's rubbish. So one thing I didn't mention whilst I was in the game that was fairly important is the controls. The controls are rotational, you rotate left and right using the joystick left and right and move using forward on the joystick. They're not very great controls for that kind of game, and the sound was pretty much just a few bleeps and footstep noises which weren't too bad. Okay, so that's the game played. That's all you're going to see from my review of it. So let's get on to the review scores. Starting with the packaging, which was pretty nice. This packaging is definitely better than the original white and red big screenshot on the front cover packaging. Quite like the image of the robot on the front, and the instructions were reasonably comprehensive as well. So I'm going to give the packaging 7 out of 10. Presentation, well, the title screen's not exactly amazing, but it's got plenty of information on it. The ability to load and save games if you really wanted to is quite nice. Plenty of hints on there. No music or anything like that, but I still think the presentation's reasonably good. So I'm going to give that 6 out of 10. And that's where the reasonable scores come to an end, because graphics, well, they're terrible. I mean, obviously they've ported over from the Spectrum, but they just don't look as good as the Spectrum version of those kind of graphics. They're confusing. Everything being the same colour just makes it really difficult to work out whether things are actually an object or just a bit of scenery that you have to negotiate around. So not impressed with the graphics at all, and I'm going to give them just 2 out of 10. Sound is also pretty poor. You've got the noise of the footsteps, a few bleeps and things as you interact with stuff. They weren't too bad, I suppose. Very functional at best though, so I'm going to give them a 3 out of 10. And playability, well, it's horrible. Firstly, the control of the character is awful. The rotational control just doesn't help you move around very quickly. He moves very slowly anyway. You've got to use loads of different keys to interact with stuff, which just makes it confusing. And the whole idea of just walking around this maze, picking up objects and taking them back to one place isn't very interesting in the first place. But then it's made really difficult and annoying by the fact that your fuel runs out really quickly. So you've got to be constantly finding fuel to top up your fuel supply. And this is another example, just like the last game I played, Rainbow Dragon, where you've got the makings of a half-decent arcade adventure game, but it's completely ruined because you've got no time to explore and interact with things because you're constantly trying to find something to stop you dying. Now in the last game it was repairing those pillars all the time, and in this game it's trying to find a fuel pod to restore your fuel every 5 minutes or whatever, probably not even 5 minutes. So yeah, I just don't understand why the designers of these games thought that was a good idea. The puzzle aspect and the idea of finding objects, interacting with them and so forth, that's enough for these kind of games. You don't need something that's going to kill you off every 5 minutes unless you solve it in some way. It's just not necessary. So yeah, big rant about the game. It's awful. I hate these kind of games anyway. I've never been a fan of isometric games. That's the other point I wanted to make, is there's no reason for making it isometric perspective. It would have been just as good a game and probably better if it had been a top-down 2D game where you're in a maze trying to negotiate through and find objects and things. So yeah, not a fan of this kind of game at all, and this is a very poor example of it. So with all that said, and that was quite a rant, I'm going to give it a playability rating of 2 out of 10, which gives an overall score of 3.7, and needless to say, it was definitely not worth $1.99. Interestingly, the developer of this game, Jeff Foley, did one other game for the Commodore 64, and I've actually reviewed that game too. That game's called SOS, The Game With No Name, and I reviewed it years ago as part of the Mastertronic Chronicles. So I'm going to put a card up in the corner which you can click on to check out that review, and you'll see it's very similar to this game in a lot of respects. Isometric perspective, you play a robot, and it's also got some really frustrating gameplay elements. So there you go. I think I spent more time ranting about this game than actually playing it, and rightly so. I've made my thoughts on the game perfectly clear. If you've got any thoughts about it, then let me know in the video comments, and that will do for this game review. Well, that was a completely horrible game, and the only good news is I don't have to play that ever again. So let's move on now and pick 2 games for you to vote for me to play in a future video. Got the tin ready here, give it a shake and let's see what comes out this time. So first up we have Force 1, and going up against Force 1 is Pogo Stick Olympics. So let's get those off the shelf. Let me read them out and tell you what they're about. So Force 1, the fate of Force 1 rests in your hands. That's all it says. I'm not going to give any more away about that game. And for Pogo Stick Olympics, bounce and burst your way through hurdles, discus and much more. So there you go, those are the 2 options, Force 1 or Pogo Stick Olympics. Let me know in the video comments which of those 2 games you want me to play, and I'll somewhat reluctantly, by the looks of them, play it in a future video. Thanks very much for watching this video, see you again soon, and bye for now.